Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Garbaugust in its waning days, still as redolent as ever. This is a BookTube event created by Ollie at Crib and Ollie last year, designed to celebrate the reading of trash, where we intentionally go out of our way in August to read garbage. I've been having a blast, absolute blast. I did last year, I have been this year. I read a lot of trash anyway, some of it the bad kind of trash, the kind of trash that doesn't know it's trash, that thinks it's great. And I have to be the bearer of bad tidings to tell it that it's not. And then lots of other trash that is sort of more or less in on the joke, that certainly knows that it's not Pushkin, that is great for a change of pace, a palate cleanser. I love these things. I have forever. I'm so happy that there's a BookTube event about them. And for the course of Garbaugust, I have just been spinning the wheel with my night's reading. I read on and off throughout the day, and I write, and I answer emails, and I take care of the little baby Bean and all throughout the day. But then at night, I read exclusively. And throughout the course of the day, I am building up what I'm going to read at night. I'm building up a pile, a list. And for BookTube events, I just add whatever is in the BookTube event to that list. So I've been happily adding trash to my nightly reading. And last night, my nightly reading of trash is trending toward a theme. That hasn't been true in Garbaugust, but it's trending toward a theme. And I think you'll be able to spot the theme in last night's book. Last night's book was by John Jakes, who became incredibly famous for the Kent Family Chronicles, starting with The Bastard, and moving on from there. He came out with the can-do family of a story of a family of American immigrants, the Charbonneau family, in the bicentennial in 1976, and it took off like gangbusters, made him independently wealthy, a squillionaire. Before that, John Jakes had tried his hand at everything, like every jobbing writer had, and one of those things was sword and sorcery fantasy. He created a character called Brak the Barbarian. Not the other guy, the Barbarian, but Brak the Barbarian, who's from the north, just like Conan is. He's big and brawny, just like Conan is. He's a master at combat, just like Conan is. So facing Brak one-on-one is a fait accompli. He will win. And he also has very little patience for the eldritch powers that fill his prehistoric world, just exactly like Conan does. There might be a bit of a difference in that Brak the Barbarian seems to be really on the bad side of one particular sorceress entity, Garbaugust. but you could say the same thing about Conan. You could make the same comparison about Conan and Thulsa Doom, or Thothamon, or any of the in Robert E. Howard. There are persistent sorceress bad guys, and would have been, I think, much more persistent had Howard lived, had he kept writing. So John Jakes is here obviously doing a kind of Conan pastiche fiction, just like John Gore yesterday was a kind of obvious Tarzan pastiche fiction. There are some differences. I know this is going to sound weird to those of you who only heard about Conan but have never actually read the stories, but the Brak the Barbarian novels are extremely over the top, in a way that Conan stories tend not to be. And also, Brak has a mission, whereas Conan does not. Conan's mission is a little money, a lot of wine, and a lot of women. But Brak has a mission. He has a driving quest. He is from the north. He's been driven out of his own homeland. He's not an exile from his own homeland. He's been driven out. And I guess he doesn't like the cold anyway, because he's looking for a place. He's looking for a semi-mythical golden kingdom of warmth and splendor called Kurdistan, that he believes lies far, far, far to the south of his snowy homeland. So all throughout the Brak novels that John Jakes wrote, there's that floating in the background. No matter what happens to Brak, that's his dream. He's going in a typical Brak novel. I don't remember how many of these John Jakes wrote. Maybe 5, maybe 6. The only thing that floats them, the only thing that made them viable, is that people wanted more of Conan than they were getting. I don't remember how many of those novels there were, but in a typical Brak novel, we will meet him, he will be on his way to Kurdistan, he will encounter difficulties, he will deal with those difficulties, usually uprooting them root and branch, and then at the end of the book, he will be back on the road to Kurdistan. And we don't know if he ever gets there. Brak is not like Conan in that I don't think we ever get any different time periods of his life. I think it's just one adventure after another on the way to Kurdistan. Whereas, if you're reading a story about a very young Conan, who's a mercenary or a pilot or a pirate or whatnot, or even shackled to an oar as a slave, you, the reader, know that he's going to end up king of the greatest kingdom of his age. There's nothing like that in Brak. It's just one sword and sorcery adventure after another where he meets gigantic things and things that crawl and things that swim, no matter what, at every turn. And last night I read Brak, When Idols Walked. This old cover. I actually had the paperback of this at one time. One of you did me the great favor of finding an ebook of this and sending it along for me. This is When Idols Walk is a reference to the fact that when Brak, his travels to Kurdistan are interrupted in this book, he is taken captive in a place called the Kingdom of the Two Bays. And it's very standard, somewhat boring sword and sorcery fare. At a couple of points in the novel, I was thinking just what I thought when this first came out, which is that if it had been the Kingdom of the Two Boys, that might have been more interesting. But no, it's the Kingdom of the Two Bays. He encounters an evil sorceress, Ilona, and also he encounters the aforementioned walking idols, big stone statues that are animated by evil spirits and walk around and crush things. So on the surface, it looks like Brak is meeting an enemy that he cannot possibly defeat. His sword would break on stone. He's not as strong as these things are. He figures out a way. He is more clever than Conan, the obvious pattern on which he is a pastiche. Conan's idea of clever is, if all else fails, stab it in the eye. Brak has all sorts of other tricks up his non-existent sleeve. And so we follow him through his captivity, his capture and his captivity. There's a lot of talk here, a lot more than I remembered. I've only read this once. I read this when it came out in this paperback. This was probably 50 years ago, right? I don't remember when this paperback came out. I had this. I got it from a metal spinner rack at Tro's dry goods store. And I read it because, like everybody else, I was hungry for more sword and sorcery stuff, no matter how bad it was. And if I remember correctly, this is a lot talkier than any other Brak novel. He spends a lot of time listening to people tell him what's going on in the course of this book. And he tells other people what's going on, even though he doesn't know. Brak is a lot more chatty than Conan. And I read it again, and it's enjoyable. John Jakes is constantly upping the stakes. Constantly. He was a real classic potboiler novelist, so he knows not to let the narrative flag. I would say this probably flags as much as any Brak book that I remember, and it doesn't flag much. I don't mean to give that impression. I read it and liked it, I guess. It's pretty entertaining. It's got a slam-bang final act. Jakes knew enough to do that. He knew enough to make sure that he brought all his threads together and gave you an extra kicker. And he does, and the solution to the walking idols is so ridiculous. It is just so... I don't know exactly when this was written, but the solution that Brak comes up with to the walking idols is so 1970s. Oh my. But the whole time that I was reading it, as you can tell from this description, I was thinking of somebody else. The whole time that I was reading this book, I was not saying, yay, another Brak adventure. I was saying, this reminds me of Conan. The whole time. That's what I was thinking. I feel certain that's what I was thinking the first time I read any of these books. And I feel certain that's what most people who are reading them thought or still think. How is this different from Conan? So the whole time you're reading this book about the adventures of this burly, blonde-haired adventurer, there's another guy in the room. There's another figure that you're thinking of. I don't believe that anyone ever reads a Brak novel and is totally given over to it being a Brak novel. And that is germane to what we're talking about. I am going to read Conan pastiche fiction to finish out Garbaugust. It all counts as trash. As a lead-up to September's event, Cimmerian September, where we're reading about Conan all month long. The heart and soul of Cimmerian September, of course, is to not just read about Conan, but to read Conan, to read Robert E. Howard's canonical Conan stories. About 800 pages of them. So you can get them done in a month if you set a steady pace and set time aside for them. That's the heart and soul of Sumerian September, but there's also all the Conan pastiche novels, all the Conan comic books, which is what I'm doing. Just a month to celebrate Conan is a fantastic idea, I think. And oddly enough, Brak the Barbarian will get you in the mood to do that. It won't get you in the mood to celebrate Brak the Barbarian. It will get you in the mood to celebrate Conan. And I am, more and more so. I'm going to finish out Garbaugust with one more Conan pastiche novel, maybe another Brak novel, and then we'll be done with this event, which I'm going to miss. I'm really going to miss Garbaugust. but in the meantime, I will wrap this up for now. This was a fairly enjoyable outing. I don't think I will ever read When Idols Walked again. I'll say that about all these Garbaugust picks. But Lord knows there's a lot more trash out there. I can burn bridges all I want. It's not going to run out of trash anytime soon. So I'll wrap this up, and I'll see you tomorrow on the last day of Garbaugust 2023. Sad event. Thank you, BookTube.